I still remember exactly how the lights felt on my skin. Too bright, too hot. The kind that made your eyes water if you stared too long. I was standing just behind the heavy black curtain of the stage, heart racing in my chest, holding my breath while pretending not to care. The company I had poured my soul into for 2 years, my late nights, my weekends, my ideas, was finally about to go public with our big win. And I was told to stay backstage. Because I was just the intern. The voice of our new CEO, Mason, rang out across the auditorium, slick and confident like it always was. Today marks a milestone. Our startup Nexora has reached a valuation of $45 million, thanks to the brilliant leadership of our team and the relentless innovation of our engineers. Applause erupted. Except, the lead engineer wasn't on stage, because that would have been me. And I wasn't even invited to sit in the front row. Just 2 years earlier, I had walked into Nexora with a tattered backpack, a burning idea, and a portfolio of messy code. I was still finishing my computer science degree. I wasn't anyone's first choice. I didn't have connections. I didn't wear blazers or speak in buzzwords. But I knew what users wanted. I knew how to build a product that worked. And more importantly, I cared. Cared in the way only underdogs do, when they have nothing to lose and everything to prove. The app that launched Nexora into the spotlight? I designed the wireframes on a napkin at a sandwich shop. I wrote the first 10,000 lines of code alone in my bedroom, fueled by instant noodles and Spotify playlists called Don't Give Up Yet. And yet here I was, standing in the dark while Mason smiled for the cameras, saying things like, "Our breakthrough AI features were a team effort, and we've built something extraordinary together." Together. He hadn't even been hired until we were already in beta testing. He'd walked in 6 months ago, all charm and spreadsheets, shaking hands like he owned the place. The board loved him. He had vision, the kind that involved meetings and golf and buzzwords like scalability and monetization. He never asked me about the app's infrastructure. He never stayed late when servers crashed. He never once thanked me personally, but he did know how to take credit. When I approached him before the event to ask if I'd be on stage too, just for a moment, maybe to demo the app I wrote, he smiled without smiling. "Lizzie, you're so valuable to the team," he said, "but this event is about optics. Investors don't need to meet every coder behind the curtain." Every coder, like I was just one of many. I wanted to say something, anything. But the lump in my throat had already formed, and I knew if I opened my mouth, something embarrassing might come out. So I just nodded. And now, backstage, I watched him call out names. The lead innovation officer who once called JavaScript Java whatever. The PR director who still didn't know how to update her phone. The guy who wrote our website copy. And got a front row seat. And not once did he say my name. At the end of the event, they rolled out the new team slide. My heart skipped when the screen lit up. There I was. Except, I wasn't. My photo was gone. My name, my title, erased like I never existed. I stood frozen as the audience clapped, my face flushed with shame, then rage, then something colder. Clarity, because they didn't just overlook me. They erased me on purpose. 2 days later, I woke up to a different kind of betrayal. I opened my laptop, typed in my login, and got an error message. Access denied. Slack? Disconnected. Email? Disabled. Even my company badge stopped working. They had cut me off. No warning, no call. Not even a courtesy email. Just gone. The same app they were now showcasing to investors, to press, to the world, was still running. Still branded as Nexora's crown jewel. But the version they had copied before cutting me out? It wasn't the final version. And it didn't contain the one thing they needed most. The heartbeat of the system. The real-time logic engine I had written from scratch. Because what they didn't know, what Mason never bothered to ask, was that the working code they kept was actually a placeholder. And the real engine? was still sitting in my private Git repository, waiting. As I stared at the lifeless login screen, I felt the panic that had started to rise melt into something else. A slow, deliberate smile. They had no idea what they had just done. Not yet. But they were about to find out. I spent the next few hours in silence. Not sad, not angry, just still. My apartment was quiet, save for the low hum of my monitor and the occasional creak of the building settling. It was the kind of silence you get right before a storm. And in that stillness, I opened my private repository. The real one. The one with the full production engine. The one they didn't even know existed. You see, I learned the hard way during my first internship that companies love to cut corners when the stakes get high. I had written a beautiful analytics tool for a marketing firm once, only to be dismissed without warning the day it was finished. They used my code anyway. I had no contract, no protection, no leverage. I was 19. I cried for a week, but not this time. This time, I built safeguards. The version Nexora was currently running, the one they copied from my shared dev folder, was a safe build. It looked like it worked. It even passed the basic unit tests. But without the real-time logic engine, it was just a pretty interface wrapped around empty promises. The data parsing wouldn't scale. The AI modules were hard-coded. And worst of all, the billing integration was incomplete. If they rolled out this version to international users, like Mason promised at the press conference, it would crash. Not maybe. Not possibly. It would fail. Payment would loop. Data would stall, and worst-case scenario, they'd trigger fraud detection protocols from major gateways. The kind of failure that leaves a mark. Still, I wasn't rushing to pull the trigger. Not yet. I wasn't out for revenge. I was out for recognition. For truth. For dignity. I wanted them to know exactly what they had done. And more importantly, why it mattered. I called Noah first. Noah was one of the original co-founders. Quiet, brilliant, awkward in meetings, but always respectful. He'd gone part-time after a family emergency and wasn't involved in the press event. But I knew he would care. When he picked up, I barely had to say anything. My name alone made him pause. "Lizzie," he said, "I've been trying to reach you. What's going on? Your Slack account disappeared." "They removed me," I said flatly. "What?" "I woke up this morning and everything was gone. No access, no email. They erased me." He was silent for a moment. Then, "That doesn't make sense. You wrote the engine?" "Noah," I said carefully. "They're running the wrong build." Another pause. "The pre-release version?" "The placeholder," I confirmed. There was a sharp inhale on the other end. "Oh my God. Do they know?" "They will," I said. "Soon." He didn't say much after that. Just, "I'll call you back." And then the line went dead. While I waited, I pulled up the public dashboard Mason had proudly shown off at the event. It looked impressive. Charts, user metrics, a map pulsing with live interactions. But I knew the truth. Those metrics were cached. Old data being replayed from a static file. A trick. A lie. And as they pushed the app out to our early international beta users, I knew what was coming. A few hours later, my phone buzzed again. Noah. "They're panicking," he said. "Support is getting flooded. Billing is failing. Customers can't log in. The dev team doesn't know what's wrong. Mason's losing it." I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. Instead, I felt a strange ache in my chest. Because I didn't want the app to fail. I'd built it to help people. Small business owners trying to automate their client scheduling, freelancers trying to manage leads. It was never supposed to be a trophy for executives. It was supposed to mean something. And now it was burning. Because I wasn't invited to the table. Noah continued. "I told them to call you. I said they needed to fix this, and you were the only one who could." I shook my head. "Too late for that." "You're sure?" "They deleted me, Noah. They removed my name from the codebase, from the website. They chose this. He sighed. What are you going to do? I'm not sure yet, I said honestly. But they need to learn. This isn't just about ownership or credit. It's about trust. About knowing the difference between using people and building with them. Before we hung up, Noah said one more thing. They thought you were disposable, he said. But it turns out you were the foundation. And those words stuck with me. That night, I received my first email from Mason since being removed. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even direct. It came through the CTO, a guy I barely knew. Subject line, urgent build request. Please advise. Body. Hi, Lizzie. We're experiencing unexpected issues with the latest deployment. Would appreciate your insight on some legacy code integration. Are you available for a quick sync? Legacy code. They were already trying to reframe it, as if my engine was a ghost from the past instead of the core of everything they were showcasing. I didn't reply. I just watched the system status page flicker from operational to partial outage. And I knew. This was just the beginning. The next morning, the headlines started to trickle in. Not from the big outlets, yet, but from the tech blogs that watch startups like Nexora, like Hawks. Nexora's breakthrough app stumbles during global rollout. Payment failures, login glitches, what's going on at Nexora? Valuation high, functionality low, is Nexora all talk? I sat at my kitchen table, scrolling through the articles with a calm I didn't entirely recognize. There was no joy in it, no schadenfreude. Just a quiet satisfaction that truth, for once, wasn't being buried. I poured coffee into my favorite mug. It said, "Trust me, I'm the dev." Ironic now. My inbox had ballooned overnight, from silence to chaos. Messages from junior developers I used to mentor, former interns, even a few members of marketing. They didn't know the whole story, but they knew something was wrong. They could feel the shift in the air. I didn't respond to any of them. Not yet. Instead, I opened the email from Nexora's CTO again. I stared at that line. Legacy code integration. And reread it slowly. They wanted access, not understanding. A solution, not a conversation. And certainly not accountability. But then something unexpected happened. My phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again. Same number. On the third call, I picked up. Lizzie, it's Michelle. From the board, I blinked. Michelle? I'm sorry to call directly, but Mason's been less than forthcoming with answers. I asked point blank about the app's architecture. He dodged. Then I saw your name was gone from the team page. I put 2 and 2 together. I stayed silent. I want to hear your side of the story, she added. So I told her. Not everything. Not yet, but enough. I explained the development path, the original architecture, the stripped-down placeholder version they'd copied. I explained how I'd built a layered permission system for the app's logic engine, and how that engine was never committed to the shared repo. I told her about the access denial, the erasure, the email calling my work legacy code. When I finished, Michelle exhaled. I had a feeling, she said. You're not the first brilliant mind I've seen pushed out by ego. But I promise you, you won't be the last to stand up and get your name back. I wanted to believe her. Are you calling on behalf of the board? I asked. No, she said. I'm calling because I'm tired of watching founders and CEOs pretend products fall from the sky. We invest in people, not just press conferences. That sentence hit deeper than I expected. Then she asked the question that changed everything. If we invited you to speak at an emergency stakeholder meeting, would you come? I hesitated. My gut screamed yes. My heart whispered no. I wasn't looking to grandstand. I wasn't interested in payback. Not if it meant becoming like them. But I also knew this was a chance. Maybe the only chance to set the record straight. On my terms. I'll consider it, I said finally. But only if I can speak freely. No PR edits. No slide decks. Just the truth. Michelle didn't pause. You'll have the floor. By the end of the day, I received an official calendar invite. Emergency shareholder briefing. App stability. Infrastructure and strategic oversight. It was scheduled for Friday, 3 days from now. 3 days. I spent the first night drafting notes. Not a speech, just a truth map. What I'd built, how it worked, why it mattered. I included diagrams, timelines, snippets of real commits with my GitHub signature. Everything time-stamped, documented, indisputable. On the second day, Mason finally reached out. A voicemail again. His voice, for the first time, didn't sound smug. It sounded strained. Lizzie, hey, look, I realize there have been some miscommunications. I think we both know there's been pressure on all sides, and I may have made some assumptions that weren't fair. Let's put that behind us. I'd really like to sit down and work through this. No apology, just negotiation. It confirmed everything I already knew. Mason didn't want to make things right. He wanted to make them quiet. I didn't respond. Instead, I called Michelle. I'll be there Friday, I said, and I'll bring everything. That night, I sat on my balcony as the city buzzed below. The skyline was a mess of blinking lights in motion, but I felt oddly still, like the eye of a storm. Because this wasn't just about an app anymore. It was about being erased. And now, I had a seat at the table. Friday came like a quiet avalanche, the kind you feel building days before it hits. But when it finally arrives, everything is too still, too controlled, too rehearsed. I dressed carefully that morning. Not for them. For me. A charcoal blazer over a simple blouse. No flashy logos, no power heels. Just comfort, clarity, and control. I tied my hair back the way I used to when coding late into the night. When the world disappeared and only the logic remained. By 9 a.m., I arrived at Nexora headquarters. I didn't take the employee entrance. I walked straight through the front doors, past the gleaming wall-sized screens flashing user growth stats, and into the main elevator, where the receptionist offered me a forced smile. They're expecting you on floor 7, Ms. Lin. Thanks, I said, voice calm. The doors closed behind me. Floor 7 was normally reserved for major investor presentations. It had frosted glass, white walls, and the kind of minimalist furniture that screams, "We spent more on this room than your salary last year." It was perfect for what I had in mind. When the elevator opened, I was met by Michelle and 2 other board members. All 3 stood, greeted me formally, but their eyes held something different. Recognition. Not just of my presence, but of my importance. We shook hands. Inside the conference room, the table was already full. Mason was there, of course, sitting at the head with his usual overconfidence and a stack of papers he wouldn't read. The CTO sat to his left, expression tight. Legal counsel, a few investors, and a handful of senior engineers filled out the rest. There were laptops, coffees, nervous glances, but not a single smile. I sat across from Mason, didn't speak, didn't look away. Michelle opened the meeting. We're here today to clarify the origin, structure, and current integrity of the Nexora platform. Lizzie Lin has requested to present her contributions directly. She looked at me. Lizzie, you have the floor. I stood slowly, unzipping the slim black portfolio I'd brought with me. No slides, just facts. I'm not here for drama, I said, and I'm not here to rehash personal slights. I'm here to show you what's real. I passed around printed documents, diagrams, timestamps, Git commits, technical overviews. I had highlighted the logic engine that served as the app's core, complete with version histories and digital signatures that traced back to me. Then I pulled out a printed version of the internal codebase, the placeholder version Mason had launched with. I flipped to the billing integration module. This is the version Nexora deployed to its beta users during global rollout, I said, tapping the paper. This line here, it loops payment tokens without resolving the final transaction state. It's a sandbox loop, meant for testing. Mason's face started to shift. Here's the version I never uploaded to the main repo, I continued, sliding a second packet forward. Fully tested, PCI compliant, live token ready. It's housed in my private repository, which I can prove was built entirely on my own time and hardware outside of Nexora servers. I paused. Then I looked him dead in the eye. You never asked how it worked. You just assumed it would. The silence that followed was dense. Michelle leaned forward. Lizzie, to be clear, you're saying the app's core engine was never actually owned by the company? I'm saying the deployed version was incomplete, and the complete version, the one that works, is mine. Legal scribbled furiously. Mason finally spoke. This is absurd, he said, laughing hollowly. She was an intern, an hourly developer. I wasn't an intern. I cut in, voice sharp but steady. Not by title, not by contribution. And every employment agreement I signed gave me IP rights to self-built tools not submitted to Nexora's repository. I turned to the CTO. You knew. You saw the placeholder commit. You signed off anyway. He paled. Michelle raised a hand. Let's stay focused. Lizzie, can the stable engine be implemented today? Yes, I said, but not by accident, not by force, only by trust, and with a real agreement this time. Mason laughed again, but nobody followed. I sat down. The room stayed quiet for a long time. Finally, one of the investors spoke. So, what exactly do you want, Lizzie? I looked at him, clear-eyed. A title that matches my contribution, a contract that protects my work, and the ability to rebuild this product the way it was meant to be built, from the inside out. And if we say no, I stood. Then the version you have keeps breaking, and when the press asks what happened to your star product, I'll tell the truth. Another pause. Michelle looked around the room. We'll take a short recess. Everyone stood, except Mason. He stayed in his seat, jaw tight, knuckles white around the arms of his chair. And for the first time, he looked afraid. Not of me, but of what I represented. The recess lasted exactly 17 minutes. I spent them alone, standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows just outside the conference room. Below, the city buzzed like it always did. Cars threading through intersections, people rushing in and out of glass buildings. But up here, everything felt suspended. Behind me, voices rose and fell. Mason's louder than the rest, filled with bluster. I didn't need to hear the words to know what he was saying. It was classic. Deflect, minimize, redirect. I had seen it before. In meetings, in classrooms, in life. Men like Mason didn't fear being wrong. They feared being exposed. The doors opened. Michelle stepped out. They're ready for you, she said softly. I walked back in calmly. This time the atmosphere had shifted. Investors sat straighter. Legal had stopped taking notes and started watching me. Mason still wore the same suit, but he looked like it fit differently now, like he was sweating through it. Michelle took her seat and glanced around the room. We've reviewed the documentation, verified timestamps, and consulted legal regarding IP ownership. She looked at me. We're prepared to make an offer. I sat back down. Let's hear it. She turned to the head of legal, who cleared his throat and read from a printed sheet. Nexora is prepared to offer reinstatement as lead product architect, retroactive title adjustment, full credit on all public documentation of the Nexora app, and a permanent seat on the Product Oversight Committee. In addition, a new employment contract will grant shared rights to any future core engine development, with a profit-sharing clause attached. Mason opened his mouth, but a sharp glance from Michelle stopped him cold. I was silent. Not because I was unsure. Because I wanted the silence to stretch. I needed them to feel the weight of what they were asking. Not just the technical fix, but the human cost of erasing someone and then expecting a seamless return. I want one more thing, I said finally. Heads turned. I want written protection for any developer on my team. Past, present or future. No NDA threats, no quiet terminations, no ghosting contributors. We work transparently or we don't work at all. One of the investors raised a brow. That's a pretty strong demand. I met his eyes. So is building your product from scratch. Michelle gave a small nod. Approved. And Mason? I asked, turning to him for the first time that hour. What's his role moving forward? Michelle looked at the other board members. There was a quiet exchange of nods. Effective immediately, she said. Mason will step down from CEO duties. He'll remain in an advisory role until the end of the quarter, after which the board will revisit his future with the company. I nodded. Then we have a deal, Mason finally snapped. This is ridiculous, he barked, standing up. You're giving her everything because of a few bugs? She was an intern. You think she can run a company? No, Michelle said calmly, but she can build one. And that's more than you've done. The room went still. Mason looked around, hoping for support. But none came. Then he looked at me. You'll regret this, he said under his breath. I stood slowly. No, Mason. You will. Because when you call someone just the intern, what you're really saying is, I can't recognize value unless it comes in a suit and tie. He left without another word. After the meeting, I returned to my apartment and collapsed into my desk chair. The silence was no longer heavy. It was liberating. I opened my inbox, flooded. Developers I'd worked with in the past, a few old professors, even tech reporters sniffing around the app's crash and mysterious architecture issues. I ignored the press. Instead, I opened a blank document titled, New Foundations, Rebuilding the Nexora Core. This time, I wasn't doing it alone. The next week, I assembled a small team. People who had been pushed out quietly. Coders who never spoke up in meetings but always delivered. Designers who had ideas but were told they didn't match the brand. I brought them in. We started reviewing everything. Code, UX, scalability, the works. We restructured the logic engine, implemented real-time performance tracking, rebuilt the billing module with multilingual UI and full accessibility. We didn't just fix the broken pieces. We made them better. And this time, every contributor's name went into the credits. No exceptions. At the next all-hands meeting, I stood at the front of the room. No curtain, no backstage pass, no dimmed identity. I wasn't introduced as a genius or a hero. Just, this is Lizzie. She's the reason we're still standing. And that was enough. But I knew it wasn't over yet. Not entirely. Because legacies don't vanish with pink slips. They linger. And Mason? He wasn't finished. The quiet didn't last long. 2 weeks after the rebuild launched, Nexora was back in the headlines. This time for the right reasons. The new architecture was praised. The international rollout resumed without a glitch. Customer feedback surged with 5-star ratings, and investors exhaled. A few even called it a rare redemption arc in tech. But behind the headlines, something else was brewing. I started noticing it in small ways first. An error message that wasn't mine. A calendar meeting invite I never sent. Then one morning, I opened my personal laptop and found an attempt to reset my email password. 3 times. It wasn't random. It was targeted. I knew who it was before I even asked. Mason. He still had contacts inside. Loyalists. People who didn't care what he'd done. Only what he represented. Money, status, power. And I was the symbol of everything he lost. So he did what people like him always do when they lose control. He tried to poison the well. False complaints about hostile leadership. Anonymous HR tips claiming I was erratic, emotionally unstable. One even said I'd falsified my credentials. All of them easily disproven. But it didn't matter. The whispers had begun. And I knew from experience, whispers can be more dangerous than outright lies. I sat in my new office one evening, staring at a Post-it on my wall. It had 3 words scribbled in Sharpie. Build, prove, protect. It was a mantra I wrote during my first year at Nexora, back when I still thought being great at your job was enough to earn respect. Now I understood that being great wasn't the end. It was the beginning. You had to protect what you built. That week, I initiated an internal audit. Again, this time I led it myself, with full authority from the board. I brought in third-party digital forensics. We checked logs, firewall attempts, even non-company devices pinging internal systems. It wasn't just about catching Mason. It was about sending a message. That this was a different Nexora now. 3 days into the audit, we found it. A cloned login string pinged from an old contractor's IP address. That contractor had been referred by Mason months ago. Someone who never completed onboarding, but whose credentials still worked. Buried in an inactive user list. I brought it straight to the board. Michelle's expression was unreadable at first. Then she said, "He's still trying to run this place from outside." "He's trying to burn it down," I said. She leaned back in her chair. "Then maybe it's time we make it official." That afternoon, the board convened and voted. Unanimous. Mason's advisory contract was terminated. All remaining access revoked. A formal statement was prepared. Not for the press, but for us, the people who actually built the company. It read, "Leadership is not a title. It's a responsibility. Nexora acknowledges and condemns the actions that undermined that responsibility. We stand by the builders." It was more than I expected, more than I needed, but not more than we deserved. A week later, I received a letter in the mail. No return address, no signature. Just one sentence written in neat, sharp handwriting. "Congratulations. Enjoy your little empire." For now. I didn't even flinch. Because here's the thing. I had already won. Not by retaliation, not by sabotage, but by enduring the storm and refusing to give away my name. I didn't just build code. I built culture. I built boundaries. And I built the kind of company I wish had existed when I was 19, crying in my dorm room after being fired the first time someone stole my work. That version of me? She would be proud of this one. Now, every new dev hired at Nexora gets a small welcome kit. Laptop, onboarding docs, and a hardcover notebook with our 3 words stamped in bold on the cover. Build, prove, protect. And inside, the very first page reads, "Your ideas matter. You matter. Never let anyone convince you otherwise." Some ask if it's overkill, a bit dramatic, too sentimental for tech. But those people never had their names erased from something they bled to build. I walk the halls now and people nod, smile, make eye contact. Not because I intimidate them, but because they see me. They know what I stood through and what I stood for. And that, more than any press release, any payout, any shiny new office chair, is what I'll carry forward. Not just as Lizzie the architect, not even as Lizzie the leader, but as Lizzie, the girl who stayed quiet once, and then rewrote the story.